Hi, my name is Brett Wood. I'm the producer of this collection, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about the condition of the films included in Pioneers of African American Cinema, and discuss some of the things we did to make them more presentable for this release. As you can see when you sample the films in the series, the quality of the source material varies wildly. The natural impulse would have been for us to limit the collection to those films that exist in better than average condition. But that would have defeated one of the purposes of Pioneers, to showcase some of the lesser-known films that have never been released on video. And the reason why some of these films haven't been released on video is because the surviving film elements are considered unworthy of a commercial master. And that's one reason why you've probably never seen, and maybe never even heard of, such films as A Reckless Rover, 11 p.m., or The Exile. Beyond the usual cleanup, there were instances of significant restoration where we added footage that was previously missing from a print. Most notable are S. Toriano Berry's restorations of Hellbound Train and Verdict Not Guilty, which he reassembled from multiple rolls of 16mm film that were not in any order to speak of. And this led to the discovery of the footage of Heaven-Bound Travelers, a film that was previously not known to exist. In the case of The Scar of Shame, film historian Pearl Bowser located the lost wedding sequence, about 90 seconds of material missing from previous versions, and so we were able to include that in this edition. Oscar Micheaux's The Exile exists as a 16mm print, essentially complete, at the Library of Congress. But archivist Rob Stone determined that they had one reel of 35mm material. We examined it and realized it was the musical numbers from The Exile. So we used that to upgrade certain sections of the film and, best of all, restored one musical number that was missing from the 16mm print. You'll notice in some of the musical numbers there is a not-so-subtle shift in the quality of the material, and that's because there were splices in the 35mm reel, and we had to cut back and forth between them. Unfortunately, the sound quality of The Exile is really poor. Luckily, we were able to access a dialogue continuity script from the New York State Archives, and we used that as the foundation for English subtitles. I highly recommend that when you watch The Exile, you watch it with the English captions turned on. One of the things I'm most proud of in this collection is the inclusion of incomplete films. In the case of By Right of Birth, only 4 minutes of the film exist. It's so fragmentary that you can't really comprehend the plot, but this is the only known footage of the Lincoln Motion Picture Company, the first film company owned and operated by African Americans. Very little exists of Richard Norman's Regeneration, and what does survive looks, frankly, terrible. But we should still be able to see it, right? It shouldn't lie hidden away in an archive somewhere. We want people to see these films, even if they are fragmentary. Oscar Micheaux's Birthright is missing the first 2 reels, which is why you've probably never seen that film before. But we located the dialogue continuity script and were able to provide a description of what occurred in the missing sequences. And it turns out the movie plays quite well in spite of the missing footage.
You ain't no black Jesus, even if you is a woods calf.
I'd hoped to do the same for Veiled Aristocrats. That film is also missing a large section from the beginning. We know because the running time is much shorter than it was upon original release. And also, if you watch the trailer, you can see still images of some of the scenes that have been lost. Now, as far as the general cleanup we performed on the films, every film in the collection was mastered in high definition, sometimes at 2K resolution, sometimes 4K, and all of them underwent some kind of audiovisual cleanup. Usually this entails color grading. Yes, you still color correct black and white films just to maintain the consistency of the image. We stabilized a lot of the material that was shaking, due either to malfunctions of the original camera or improper lab work on the print. We painted out individual flaws such as splice marks, cue marks, and a certain amount of nitrate decomposition. Of course, some films are just beyond repair. Most of the silence required us to adjust the projection speed, since most films pre-1928 ran at a slower speed than the now standard 24 frames per second. We applied automated dirt removal to some of the films, but I chose to do this sparingly, as we felt in this context it was fine to leave most of the grain and dirt as is, since these are straightforward representations of archival rarities. There's a point at which you clean the film so much that you begin to change its content. And I was always conscious of this and tried not to clean a film up too much. Yeah, on some films maybe we could have gone further. It's a judgment call that's sometimes hard to make. And speaking of not cleaning a film up, this brings me to one of my favorite aspects of the collection, and I hope you'll indulge me for a minute while I share it with you. We know from surviving behind-the-scenes footage that Oscar Micheaux liked to coach his actors when he directed them. This was pretty standard in the silent era, but at the dawn of sound, directors had to stop this practice, otherwise their voices would be heard in the film. Still, sometimes Micheaux couldn't restrain himself, and we get little snippets of his voice speaking to the actors. You know, in a bigger budget film, this would have all been edited out. And frankly, I could have edited it out, but it's a fascinating little insight into Micheaux's directing style. Okay, you want to hear what I'm talking about? Let me show you. In 10 Minutes to Live, a scene isn't going the way Micheaux wants it to, so he calls cut, and then he reshoots the scene. And for some reason, this all remains in the film today, including both of the dialogue takes.
Oh, any part will do, just as long as you use it. I'll work anything.
Yes.
Oh, any part will do, just as long as you use it. And as to the pay, why I don't want any. I'll work for nothing.
Now, I'm not sure what he's saying here. Betrayed her?
Oh, no. You're mistaken. It is true that he betrayed her.
And no, that's not a ghost in the mirror on the wall. I'm pretty sure that's the director making an accidental cameo. In Veiled Aristocrats. In The Girl from Chicago, we hear him feed an actor a line.
You gotta give it to her. Well, you gotta give it to her. She has talent.
Apparently, a bystander almost interrupts the shooting of the scene, and the actor himself has to gesture for the person to back off.
Oh, Alonzo, you're so fine.
Now, I don't consider these errors or bloopers, not in the least. I think of them more like Easter eggs, little glimpses of life behind the scenes of an Oscar Micheaux production. They also give you a sense of the economic and time restraints that the crew was working under, not having the luxury of multiple takes or a finely tuned sound mix. And knowing that Micheaux had a side of his personality that was impish and provocative, I wouldn't be surprised if he left some of these things in intentionally. Little uncredited cameo appearances, little signatures of his personality. These are just a few of them, and I'm sure there are more lurking in the films elsewhere, so happy hunting and enjoy the collection.